All right, we're ready to begin lesson number 7. So before we look at our keyword, let's look at our new letters. There are no nikudim in this lesson or vowel sounds, so there are 3 letters to learn. We have the letter pei, and I've heard this letter taught like it's shaped like a parrot. There's the eye and there's the beak. So pei as in parrot, pei as in park. Then we have resh, and this letter, think about why you're learning Hebrew. If you're learning Hebrew to read from the Bible or to stay within an American context, you can call this letter resh. But if you're learning for more of an Israeli context, you want to learn kind of the Hebrew spoken in Israel, then this letter is pronounced more like resh, a slight rolling R. I've been told that it's comparable to a French R or a German R. I live in Louisiana, so I get the French aspect. I don't know anything about German, so I can't confirm or deny that. It's not rolled quite as much as a Spanish R is. So what I would tell you to do is, if you're just learning the Aleph Beit, and this is your first time, learn the Aleph Beit. And then what you can do, there are free videos on YouTube where you can actually learn to pronounce letters and accents like an Israeli. There are whole videos on how to roll and make a proper resh like an Israeli does, and how to say certain words that we in America say one way, or in the diaspora in general, outside of Israel, they say in a certain way versus an Israeli accent. So I would say learn the Aleph Beit first, and then if you want to sound more like an Israeli and kind of adjust your pronunciation, then go and look those videos up. Like I said, there's a lot of great free stuff. It just helps to have a basic knowledge of Hebrew first. And if you already have that, then you can decide, okay, how do I want to sound? I don't know how resh sounds in Ladino or Judaismo. I would assume, based off of the fact that it was formed in Iberia, that there's a bit of a roll to it. But I don't know that for sure. And I don't know how resh sounds in Yiddish. I don't know if it's a different sound. I've heard someone talk about, who was a Yiddish speaker, about people criticizing his resh, and I didn't know if he didn't roll it enough or rolled it too much, or I don't know what the resh is in Yiddish. But so a lot of people just say, in America, will say resh, and we'll say it makes the R sound, but understand that you're going to hear a bit of a roll if somebody has been trained in Israeli Hebrew, or someone is trying to sound Sephardic or Mizrahi, Middle Eastern, with their particular pronunciation. So just be aware of that. Okay, now we have the final mem, the mem sofit. And this is mem if it's the last letter in a Hebrew word. If the mem is at the very end, then this is the shape it takes, but it still has the same sound or m sound. Just like we learned nun and final nun, or nun sofit, we have a final mem. Okay, and now let's go up to our keyword. And our keyword has 2 syllables broken apart here and here. So it's going to be pu Reem. Purim. And this is one of those words that if you've grown up in an American context, and probably any English speaking context outside the land of Israel, you probably call this word Purim or Purim. Purim. And that's a holiday. And here are some of the symbols associated with the holiday. Here's Haman, the evil Haman. We boo his name when we hear it read in the synagogue. Here are the delicious triangular shaped cookies known as Hamantaschen, or Haman's hats. Here's the mask. You wear a mask at Purim. Here's the grogger that we use to boo out his name. And then the beautiful scroll, the Megillah, which is just simply the book of Esther, from the writings portion of the Jewish Bible and the Old Testament of the Christian Bible. Okay, so people often flip a coin or draw names out of a hat to make choices. Picking names is one way of drawing lots. The name of one of our happiest holidays comes from drawing lots or numbers. The Hebrew word Purim means lots. How did this holiday get its name? The Megillah tells us that Haman drew Purim to pick a date to kill all the Jews of Persia. That date was the 14th of Adar, but we all know that it was Haman who had lots of trouble on that day. Okay, so this is also one of those lessons where there's a lot of like Jewish cultural knowledge that's kind of in there. That would go great if you're teaching this in a synagogue context. But even if your interest in Hebrew is completely non-religious, this is a cultural thing. I've heard Purim compared to like Jewish version of Halloween, and in Israel it really is like a Halloween. You can look up pictures of Purim on the internet, and you'll see people dressed up in Spider-Man costumes. And interestingly enough, you'll see a lot of pictures of ultra-Orthodox Jews, like really religious Jews who don't have television or the internet, dressed up like Mr. and Mrs. Claus. I'm told they get a lot of like Christmas costumes real cheap from China, and there's no one really to sell them to, and Israelis are looking for costumes, so they buy them. So you see a lot of Christmas attire as well, superheroes and things like that, in addition to the traditional costumes that are from the story from the Book of Esther. And sometimes you'll see it mixed. You'll see people with like a mask of Haman, and underneath it they're painted like Spider-Man, because they kind of do both. But this is just a basic Jewish cultural thing. So regardless, whatever your interest is in Hebrew, if it's completely non-religious, it's still one of those cultural elements that you need to be aware of. But the only thing I kind of have issues with this book is you'd have to kind of know some of these, and it's assuming you have some kind of Jewish background knowledge, and not everyone does when they're first learning Hebrew. And I've sat in beginners courses where sometimes very devout Christians show up and they're really excited, but there are basic Jewish things that they don't know anything about. And so I would recommend, like, if you're at all interested in Hebrew, Yiddish, Ladino, and you don't really know what some of these things are, get like a basic introduction to Judaism book. Like they have them for kids with pictures and things like that. It's good to have a illustration or a pictorial representation of these objects, because you're going to find that I like to read Yiddish literature, Jewish literature, and there's a lot of references in there, and you just need to know what the references are. It's not an issue of believing or not believing. It's just a cultural thing. Remember, every language has a culture behind it, and Judaism is the culture that has formed around the Hebrew language and the alphabet, and languages that are based on the Hebrew alphabet, Yiddish and Ladino. Okay, so we go to our next page. Our keyword is still Purim, and that's also one of those words that in American context you're almost only going to hear as Purim or Purim, but Purim would be more the Israeli way of saying it. Okay, so we have Pa, Ri, Pa, Ru, Pa. And even if I roll my resh a little bit, you don't have to do that. You can just you could say Ri, Ru. Okay, 2, Rosh, Pag, Rock, Pot, Car. And just remember that a resh curves, whereas a dalet looks kind of like a resh, goes on. Okay, 3, Pasha, Puna, Mapa, Kupa, Pana. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit. All right, 4, Pita, Pizza, Tsipa, Pina, Rina. All right, 5, Pitsui, Pihuk, Sipui, Ipuk, Pinui. Remember that ui. There's not a lot of Hebrew where this occurs, so I find sometimes we kind of forget that particular nikud. Okay, 6, Uri, Tsuri, Ruti, Nurit, Aramit. Okay, 7, Ma'amin, Ma'amina, Na'amin, Ya'amin, Ya'aminu, Ya'aminu. Okay, so let's go down. And then we have a cool Hebrew word, Adar, the Hebrew month in which Purim comes, Adar. And that's usually in February or in March, kind of overlaps. And Adar is sometimes 1 month and sometimes there's two, depending on if it's a Jewish leap year. A Jewish leap year means an extra month, not an extra day. Okay, so keyword still Purim. All right. Im, kam, boom. Notice this is one syllable, even though there's three letters. There's my nikud. There's no nikud after this. This is one syllable. Boom, gam, sim, nadam, padan, agam, dagan, kadam. Okay. Rashum, hamum, rakum, pagum, parum. Notice all of these are two syllable with one letter being one syllable and then three being the second syllable. Okay. Rabim, Katzin, Iran, Kamim, Rabin. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit. All right, 5. The yud is going to be connected to this nikud, so it's bi'um, mikum, ki'um, kidum, i'um. Remember, this yud is going to be connected to that nikud, so this makes the this will be our split between the syllables. Also, again, notice here is a dalet. You see that little end that kind of goes over? Dalet runs over, whereas a resh curves. Okay, 6. Gapayim. So with 3 syllables, ga, pa, and then yim. We make the Y sound because the nikud is under it. Gapayim. Yadayim. Shinayim. Kabayim. Apayim. Notice all of these we make the Y sound because that chirik is underneath the yud. I think they're trying to trick you there. They're thinking that you're going to look at it quickly and assume that the chirik is before, but the chirik is after the yud. It's underneath the yud. So we're going to make the Y sound. Okay. All right. No, so we're going to have a mixture of reshes and dalets. So pay close attention. Yarad, Yarud, Yarid, Rada, Dayar. Tried to trick us there, mixing the dalets and the reshas. Okay, cool Hebrew words. Panim, face. And it's interesting that it's a plural. You'll learn this as you learn Hebrew. The yud and the mem, final mem, is plural. Panim. Panim. And then Adam. Adam, the first human. And remember our Hebrew word Adamah, earth or ground. Adam comes from Adamah. And you'll see that if you read the beginning line of Genesis, the beginning chapter of Genesis, where man is created. It's really interesting. And it's good just for literary. It's not a religious thing, but it's just good for literature. And you'll see there's a lot of play on words in Hebrew that don't really get translated. The play on words doesn't get translated well. All right, lesson 7. So some practice with your writing. That's real important. Remember, for your ratios, you're going to make that curve there compared to the dalet, where you're going to draw a line and then make the line underneath it with the tail. The ratio is going to curve. Then you want to practice your mems and your final mems, both forms, to know the difference. A lot of people, I find sometimes when they're writing and they're practicing, their mems and their pays, sometimes they get a little bit confused with their writing and they're writing the block form. So just be aware of that. Okay, fill in the correct mem. And then what I would do is I would practice reading them. So there's some phrases here. Final mem, regular mem, final mem, regular mem, final mem, regular mem, regular mem. And then you practice reading it. Kum, get up. Mayim, water. Rami, it's a boy's name. Purim, Purim. Amar, said. Haman, evil Haman. And also, you notice Mayim means water. If you know the actress Mayim Bialik, who was on Blossom and on The Big Bang Theory, that's where her name comes from. It's Hebrew for water, Mayim. Okay, got a new vocabulary word, and that word is Rabbi. Rabbi means rabbi. I know a lot of people think, well, wouldn't rabbi be Hebrew? Rabbi, I believe, is more Aramaic. Rabbi is Hebrew for rabbi. Okay, so it says circle all the letters that have the sound of the letter P. So you want to make sure, okay, pay. They're trying to confuse you, throwing in a bait, throwing in those mems. Don't hopefully these letters don't all look the same. You got to pay careful attention. Okay, so you can do that activity. And it says eat the hamantashen that do not contain the sound of the letter R by crossing them out. Copy over the rest of the letters on the line to answer the question. And so you can do that. And it says, what is Rami's costume? And I believe the answer is Rami Rabbi. Rami is a rabbi. It says costume. Okay, Purim is our key word still. And each grogger below, circle every Hebrew letter that matches the English sound alike. So the grogger is the thing you spin at Purim to boo out Haman's name. And they want you to circle every Hebrew letter that matches the English sound. So you would have Yud for Y. What's going to be our N? We're going to have we have a Nun. And look here, we have a Nun as well. Then we have Dalit. Then for B, for R, let me scroll down. Oh, that's why it's good to have your own copy. For R, Biresh. For Mem, it's going to be this one and this one. Final Mem, so feet, and regular Mem. For P, it's going to be Pe. For H, it's going to be Hey. And for G or G, it's going to be Gimel. All right. So now we're going to get into a little conversation. If you're struggling with knowing what these words mean, remember the goal for a lot of us is going to be just learning the Aleph Beit. Learn the Aleph Beit. Learn to start decoding. You have familiarity with it, then that's going to be easier, and it's just going to be a lot of this comprehension work. But practice where you're at. If this is your first time with Hebrew, Aleph Beit's most important. Okay, so there's a little part here. If you have partners, then you could split it up. You have Ruth, that's Hebrew for Ruth. You have Dan, that's Dan. And then you have Rami, or Rami, that's a Hebrew name for boy. So there's a little conversation going. Ruth says, Ani dog. Ani, I am, dog, fish. Ruth says, I'm a fish. Dan says, Ani Haman. I am Haman. Rami says, Ani Rabbi. I'm a rabbi. Boo Haman, because that's what we do. We say boo when we see Haman. He's the villain of the story. And then it wants you to write out what each child says. And so you've had some practice with that. That'd be a good thing to do when you practice on your own. You have the children in their costumes. And then it says the children are in costume because it is Purim. And you can base off the conversation, you can identify which child is which. This is Ruth. This is Dan. This is Rami. Okay, we got that prepare for prayer lesson. And they give us a cool Hebrew word. The Hebrew word is kara, to call out or read, kara. Look closely at the first word in lines 4 to 7. Each of these words is like the word kara, to call out or read. How are the two meanings of kara related? Long ago, reading was always something that was done out loud. Okay, and so now you have words to practice. So I'm going to go ahead and practice these with you. This is to help with our decoding. So one is dam, har, yam, par, ram. And real quick, I think I've said this, but I can't remember. The prepare for prayer, all of these are actual words. More and more of the practice are actual words in Hebrew, but there are still some sounds that are just sounds when you learn a letter. But if you're really interested in learning meanings of Hebrew words and translation, especially if you've already kind of learned the Aleph Beit and this is just like a review, then you might want to go into finding the meaning of these words. And these are all pretty basic words, like dam is blood, har is mountain, yam is sea, par I think is cow, and so like all of these are words, and then you had ram, then in two you have damim, that's kind of the plural of blood, harim, that's a plural of mountains, so mountains, yamim, the sea, the seas, parim, I think it's multiple cows, ramim would be ram is like the heights. And I'm going to stop real quick to go let my dog in, just like we were meeting in person. Okay, and I'm back. All right, 3. Kamim, Nashim, Bayamim, Panim, Banim. 4. Kara, Ra'a, Ratza, Pana, Bara. 5. Karati, Ra'iti, Ratziti, Paniti, Barati. Let me scroll down. Karata, Ra'iti, Ratzita, Panita, Barata. All right, 7. Karanu, Ra'inu, sorry, I'm gonna start over. I feel like I'm struggling. 7. Karanu, Ra'inu, Ratzinu, Paninu, Baranu. Okay, I think that's the last for lesson 7. Yep. Okay, and for the Prepare for Prayer series, all of these, like I said, are very basic. They're words that are in the, I believe, in the morning Sabbath service, as well as also a lot of them in the daily service. And you can get prayer books and find a lot of these if you go to synagogue or pray the services regularly. You've seen most of these words. I don't know. I think it leans a little more like in a conservative synagogue. I don't know that all of these are used as much in the Reform. For one thing, Reform uses a lot of English, and I'm talking about types of Jews and Judaism, if you're unfamiliar at all with what I'm saying. But you can actually get books. I have a whole section of educational materials from the people who did the Time to Read Hebrew. There's a whole section of books that once you're able to read Hebrew, can focus just on the prayer book. So if learning the prayers of the Siddur, learning to actually read them in Hebrew is something that's important to you, there are resources that are kind of focused in that area, but you have to know Aleph Beit first. But once you get that under your belt, if that's something that appeals to you, and again, I know I often am making these plugs for things of a cultural nature. But if you're learning about Hebrew and you're not at all interested in like religious aspects, apologize for my dog barking, get a Siddur, get a Jewish prayer book. You don't have to, it's just something good to practice with reading for cultural information. Like I said, when I read Yiddish literature, they refer to the Siddur all the time because oftentimes that's what every Jewish home had. So when writers would write about people from their childhood or write about their life experience, a lot of that is in there. And it's just being able to notice those things is really important. Okay, so that's lesson 7. Hopefully you learned a little bit about Purim if you didn't know about it before, or as most American Jews would say, Purim, or Southern Jews, Purim. And you can decide how you want to apply the Reish or Reish. It's up to you. Study your words. We're getting close to the end of volume 1. So hopefully you're sticking with it. You're learning the Aleph Beit. You're doing some decoding, and you're sticking with it. And remember, we're trying to get through the alphabet, the Aleph Beit, as quickly as possible, so that we're able to really move into whatever our areas of interest might be. Okay, that's it